Afternoon. Welcome to my kitchen for tea at 3. Hope we're well. Smell my tea. It's not full house today. I'll see if anybody else comes while the tea's brewing. Our spring day here. There's a few people coming on. That's good. I've got some tea. Smell that. I've got some cake today. I've not got biscuit, I've got cake, had a little bit of cake left over, so I've got some banana loaf today. Just a thin slice. Well, a thin slice that way, thick slice that way. Banana loaf. So we're going to talk about values today. Thought we'd do that. Kind of follow on, post-COVID. I've got a question though. I've got a question. It's a lockdown year, isn't it? Been a year. So wow, all on my own. I wasn't on my own, but now I am. I'll still do it. I'll still ask the question. You can ask it in your leisure time. We've been locked down for a year, but they're doing injections. They're doing jabs. I'm having my first jab tomorrow. I'm very excited. About my question, I hope somebody else comes. There were people, and now they've gone. Where are they gone? They didn't want to watch my kettle boil, I suppose. But my question today is: what's the 7-day average? The last 7 days, on average, how many people have had their first days of COVID? That's my question today. There's my tea. That's made. Oh, that's lovely, Clara. I'm so pleased you're here. It's just me and you. No, it's someone else. Who else is here? See if you can. Well, you'll win today. Oh, they're flooding in now. So my question. Oh, good. That's good. Clara's neg people. My question today is: how many people? What's the 7-day average for people having their first COVID jab? 7-day average. That's my question. So it's been a year. Lockdown a year today. Lockdown a year today. Facebook's rife with it. I'm old, so I'm on Facebook. Anyway, have a guess. But we're going to talk about values. Values, they intrigue me. And so I thought it might be quite a nice little thing just to talk about. It's something that Hemsley Fraser's like looking at itself at the moment. And when people say, do value statements matter? Are they important? Immediately my gut reaction is yes, they're really important. They're really important. That's my kind of gut reaction to that question. Do values really matter? And then it kind of makes you reflect, and you go, "Well, really? Are they? Do they matter? What do people do with them? How do they work with them?" And I kind of look back and I think, okay, so what's happened? Where do they work? Where don't they work? Those kind of things. What do we strive for? And the first thing for me is they have to come from within. So they do have to come from the business and the people within the business, because it's the people that make the business. Now, often with a lot of values things, and there's a lot of data to back this up about how people are, what's their buy-in to values. And there's some work by two guys called Jim Kouzes and Barry Posner, and they did a lot of work on values and kind of a simple grid just around when people are clear on kind of business values and personal values, what's their commitment to work. And what it was and then the people are asked to score. So simple four-box grid, clarity on personal values, business values, that kind of thing. Organizational values, personal values. And what the data showed was if people were very clear on their personal values, but not clear on organizational values, it had a kind of smaller impact than if they were very clear on organizational values than they were on their personal values. So if we can get people's personal values and build them into organizational values, it will generate some kind of enthusiasm. A lot of time values come top down, so the business kind of sets them, and then people go, oh yeah, they're a bit like mine. Whereas if we can collate everybody in the businesses and push them up, then they'd come from the business. But that buy-in, that top score was bizarrely, yes, the highest score is when I'm clear on my personal values and clear on organizational values. That's when I'm most committed. But when I'm clear on my personal values, the high personal value clarity, that was the second. It didn't matter whether I was clear on organisational values or low on organisational values. It was all about my personal values. So generally, people work in an organisation to a degree that's going to represent their values, but we don't always spend a huge amount of time finding out about what makes people tick, what's important to them. Other questions that kind of impacts on people: should they be unique? So should every organisation have a unique set of values? And a lot of organisations like battle for that to come up with some kind of witty words. And you know, the challenge here is does hip modern language make a value more accessible? Does it make it better for an organisation, or again, is it just wordsmithing? The uniqueness, you know, what if another company's got the same value? Is that good? Is that not good? And you know, if they overlap, you know, bearing in mind all the industries that we work in, there's got to be overlap to a degree. So sometimes that crave for individualism is not great. Because one of the things that kind of comes out is values kind of represent a community. That's what they're about. So if we go way back, even before I was working, communities were built up in areas, and then people went to work, and often those people were together in the community and then together in the workplace, because you know the places of work were built around it. You know, you take somewhere like Bournville in the Midlands, the Bournville factory, the town of Bournville. Everybody kind of lived in Bournville, worked in the Bournville factory. So the values were very clear because they were community values, and then they were just transported into the workplace. Now, of course, what's happened now, that's slightly different because people are coming from far and wide, and even more so at the moment where people might be working remotely. So how values come about is slightly different. So we kind of try and attract people in, but it's kind of, are they a truth? Or potentially are they a stick to beat people with? If somebody breaks or just doesn't quite do something that, and then they get called out. You know, and we know, you know, I think it's Fortune 500 companies and FTSE 100s, you know, something like integrity features as a value for those, something like 90% of those organizations. And I'm not suggesting they don't act with integrity, but it's just quite an interesting thing that comes out all the time. So is it just a word? Now, for me, values are things that are lived and they're felt, and they're not really scripted. And sometimes I think we script them first and then try and live them. Whereas for me, they're better if they come from what we're doing, and then we almost write them. So it's about living. So for me, when I go into organisations, you know, often I see posters around the wall talking about values and what's important and what's not important and all those kind of things. But often I can walk in and you get a feel for the value. So that becomes a little an interesting leak. You know, what is it about? They come really from things that are shared and told. You know, what do we talk about? You know, so when you think of an organisation, you know, what do you say? What are the stories you tell about those organisations? That's almost the values you see. And it doesn't matter whether we're talking about someone like Amazon, we're talking about something like Waitrose. It doesn't matter what that comes out. What's the value of that organisation? And it's the story. So even internally, I think we can look around the kind of the stories that we tell internally. You know, when we're looking at our own values and say, so what stories come out? I think a big challenge is, should our values be what we are or what we aspire to be? Because can we be 100% of the time, all the time? So I think sometimes they're going to be aspirational. This is what we set out to be. Because the trouble is, having that set of values, they come at a cost. They do come at a cost. Sometimes that can be financial, but sometimes it can just be a cost in the ways of working. If something goes against the business value, unless of course you've got a business value of we make as much money as we can or something like that. But sometimes the business that you might look at might challenge your own value, and that becomes interesting. So those things, that some of the things that are kind of value killers, should they be uniform or should they be different? It's like a paradox of values. Should we have a different set of values, or should we all use words like respect and integrity? it's an interesting one. I think I don't have an answer to that in a way. I wish I did. Believe me, I wish I did. But I think that's a real challenge. Should they be uniform or should they be different? Because if they're too different, they won't appeal to anybody. And values represent a community like they used to, where everybody from Bourneville worked in the Bourneville factory. So they were very community led. Whereas if we make them so aloof that nobody else can see in, they don't make it work. That's one of the killers. The other is, of course, resistance. People internally go, it's values, isn't it? Just values, just a post on a wall. I just do my stuff anyway. So that's where the need to get people to talk and to tell stories and to kind of measure and to learn and to listen about it. So in business, it's kind of, what do we celebrate as an organization? That could be one of your values. What draws attention about your organizations? They're the things that people can start looking at. In kind of summary with that, it's a value is what a business is, what it stands for, and why it stands for it. And they are hard to capture in 3, 4, 5 words. And it's sometimes not about the wordsmithing of them, it's about the storytelling that backs them up. It's the stories that build the culture and build the community of an organization. And whatever organization, whoever's listening here, think about your own organization and say, what stories do we tell? And then we can translate those into values. Like I said, we're currently working on a lot of stuff internally. But I think that's what we can do as well. We can make that better. What are people saying? Aspirationally, yes, we want to hit some of these things. And then we start thinking, how are we going to measure that? How are we going to see if that is happening? I come back out at the end of it and I think, do you know what? I think value statements are important, but they do require a lot of work. They require a lot of work, a lot of buy-in, and a lot of energy from people in the business to make them work. We're constantly challenged when the values are there. Anyway, I'm going to win today with how many people have had their first COVID jab. So the daily average over the last 7 days, first dose of COVID, 506,394. So I'm pleased to say I'm going to be one of those people tomorrow. Everybody have a great afternoon, and I look forward to seeing you next week. See you later, guys.